I am embarking on a quest to tell the origins of many of locations across the United Kingdom, starting on my own doorstep in East Anglia and beyond. What fascinating stories will I unearth? Join me in my search for the knowledge of the past. In 911 AD, the Carolingian ruler Charles the Simple allowed a group of Vikings to settle in Normandy under their leader Rollo. Their settlement proved successful, and they quickly adapted to the indigenous culture, renouncing paganism, converting to Christianity, and intermarrying with the local population. Over time, the frontiers of the duchy expanded to the west. In 1002, King Theled II married Emma, the sister of Richard II, Duke of Normandy. Their son Edward the Confessor spent many years in exile in Normandy, and succeeded to the English throne in 1042. This led to the establishment of a powerful Norman interest in English politics, as Edward drew heavily on his former hosts for support, bringing in Norman courtiers, soldiers, and clerics and appointing them to positions of power, particularly in the church. Edward was childless and embroiled in conflict with the formidable Godwin, Earl of Wessex, and his sons, and he may also have encouraged Duke William of Normandy's ambitions for the English throne. King Edward's death on the 5th of January, 1066 left no clear heir, and several contenders laid claim to the throne of England. Edward's immediate successor was the Earl of Wessex, Harold Godwinson, the richest and most powerful of the English aristocrats and son of Godwin. Edward's earlier opponent, Harold, was elected king by the Witnagemot of England and crowned by Ealdred, the Archbishop of York, although Norman propaganda claimed that the ceremony was performed by Stigand, the uncanonically elected Archbishop of Canterbury. Harold was at once challenged by two powerful neighbouring rulers. Duke William claimed that he had been promised the throne by King Edward, and that Harold had sworn agreement to this. Harald Hardrada of Norway also contested the succession. His claim to the throne was based on an agreement between his predecessor Magnus the Good and the earlier King of England Harthacnut, whereby, if either died without an heir, the other would inherit both England and Norway. William and Harald Hardrada immediately set about assembling troops and ships for separate invasions. In early 1066, Harold's exiled brother Tostig Godwinson raided southeastern England with a fleet he had recruited in Flanders, later joined by other ships from Orkney. Threatened by Harold's fleet, Tostig moved north. He was driven back to his ships by the brothers Edwin, Earl of Mercia, and Mercar, Earl of Northumbria. Deserted by most of his followers, he withdrew to Scotland, where he spent the middle of the year recruiting fresh forces. Hardrada invaded northern England in early September, leading a fleet of more than 300 ships, carrying perhaps 15,000 men. Hardrada's army was further augmented by the forces of Tostig, who supported the Norwegian king's bid for the throne. Advancing on York, the Norwegians occupied the city after defeating a northern English army under Edwin and Mercar on the 20th of September at the Battle of Fulford. However, just 5 days later, the tides would turn for King Harold. Harold had spent mid-1066 on the south coast with a large army and fleet waiting for William to invade. The bulk of his forces were militia who needed to harvest their crops. So on the 8th of September, Harold dismissed the militia and the fleet. Learning of the Norwegian invasion, he rushed north, gathering forces as he went, and took the Norwegians by surprise, defeating them at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September. Harald Hardrada and Tostig were killed, and the Norwegians suffered such great losses that only 24 of the original 300 ships were required to carry away the survivors. The English victory came at great cost, as Harold's army was left in a battered and weakened state. And far from the south, the battle was won, but for Harold it was yet to truly be over. William assembled a large invasion fleet and an army gathered from Normandy and the rest of France, including large contingents from Brittany and Flanders. He spent almost 9 months on his preparations, as he had to construct a fleet from nothing. According to some Norman chronicles, he also secured diplomatic support, although the accuracy of the reports has been a matter of historical debate. The most famous claim is that Pope Alexander II gave a papal banner as a token of support, which only appears in William of Poitiers' account, and not in more contemporary narratives. William mustered his forces at St. Valery-sur-Somme, and was ready to cross the English Channel by about the 12th of August. But the crossing was delayed, either because of unfavourable weather or to avoid being intercepted by the powerful English fleet. The Normans crossed to England a few days after Harold's victory over the Norwegians, following the dispersal of Harold's naval force, and landed at Pevensey in Sussex on the 28th of September. A few ships were blown off course and landed at Rumney, where the Normans fought the local Fyrd. After landing, William's forces built a wooden castle at Hastings, from which they raided the surrounding area. More fortifications were erected at Pevensey. Hearing the news, a battered, bruised and tired Harold would march south with what remained of his army, to fight of the Norman horde. At 9 a.m. Saturday, the 14th of October, 1066, in the fields of Hastings, the fierce battle started. The battle lasted until dusk. When the dust had settled, rule of Britain would be handed to William I, William the Conqueror. Exploits of the battle can be found in the Bayeux Tapestry. Harold appears to have died late in the battle, although accounts in the various sources are contradictory. William of Poitiers only mentions his death, without giving any details on how it occurred. The tapestry is not helpful, as it shows a figure holding an arrow sticking out of his eye next to a falling fighter being hit with a sword. Over both figures is a statement here: King Harold has been killed. It is not clear which figure is meant to be Harold, or if both are meant to be King Harold. Harold's death left the English forces leaderless, and they began to collapse. Many of them fled, but the soldiers of the royal household gathered around Harold's body and fought to the end. The Normans began to pursue the fleeing troops, and except for a rearguard action at a site known as the Melfarce, the battle was over. Exactly what happened at the Melfarce, or Evil Ditch, and where it took place, is unclear. It occurred at a small fortification, or set of trenches, where some Englishmen rallied and seriously wounded Eustace of Boulogne, before being defeated by the Normans. 1066 would mark the last successful invasion of the British Isles. So what has this got to do with Ipswich, where the video is based on? Ipswich thrived throughout the years as a bustling centre of imports and commerce. Even after the invasion of the Normans, they continued to have a royal mint out of Ipswich. This continued until the time of King John, in about 1215. The abbreviation that appears on the coins. By now Ipswich had a population of about 2,000. May not seem like much in modern standards, but at the time, this small town was heaving. Ipswich at this time only covered from what is currently known as Tower Ramparts west round to past Lady Lane area, past Greyfriars, and down to the dock, eastern direction. It would loop down to what is now Upper Orwell Street and down to the quay. The road structure of what makes the main town centre of Ipswich is the oldest section and remains in a similar pattern to what it did in the time of the Saxons. It would remain this way for years to come. Throughout the country, Norman influence would spread. Norman castles and churches would be built in all corners of the country, most of which still stand to this day and can be seen across the country, including in Ipswich. In the year 1200, King John granted Ipswich its first charter. A charter is a written grant by the sovereign or legislative power of a country, by which a body such as a borough, company, or university is created or its rights and privileges defined. This laid the medieval foundations of today's modern civil government. 5 large religious houses were soon to appear on the Ipswich skyline. 2 Augustinian priories, St. Peter and St. Paul, and Holy Trinity, were both built mid-12th century. The Franciscan Greyfriars Friary was built before 1298. Ipswich Whitefriars Carmelites was built 1278 to 79, and Ipswich Blackfriars Dominicans before 1263. There are still streets named after the friars in present-day Ipswich. The last Carmelite prior of Ipswich was the celebrated John Bale, author of the oldest English historical verse drama Kind Johann, c. 1538. Several hospitals, including the Leper Hospital of St. Mary Magdalene, founded before 1199, were also built. Around 1380, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales, and the merchants of Ipswich were satirized in it. Thomas Wolsey, the future cardinal, was born in Ipswich about 1475, the son of a wealthy landowner. He was to become one of Henry VIII's closest political allies. He founded a college in the town in 1528, which was for its brief duration one of the homes of the Ipswich School. He remains one of the town's most famed figures. By now Ipswich boasted a population of over 3,000. During the 14th to 17th centuries, Ipswich was a compter for the Hanseatic League, the port being used for imports and exports to the Baltic. The Hanseatic League was a commercial and defensive confederation of merchant guilds and their market towns.